the major news in baseball yesterday, and that was Corbin Burnes going to the Baltimore Orioles. We've talked about the Orioles a lot this offseason in the prism of what the hell are they doing? You have a championship caliber team. You need starting pitching. Now they have the last laugh. They go out and get Corbin Burnes to anchor their rotation, one of the best pitchers in baseball. It increased their odds, depending on what book you're looking at, anywhere from like 200 to 400 points. And when you're talking about a championship movement, that is substantial. We'll get into all the World Series odds after this move. But Renee, your initial gut reaction when you heard the Corbin Burnes news yesterday, we will talk about, what he went for and what that is in Phillies land and yada, 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 all that stuff. But what was your initial gut?
It's like Baltimore's been telling us, relax, bruh, I got this. Because they went from being quiet to now making the biggest splash this week. Listen, the Baltimore Orioles, it's been quite a time for Baltimore in general. Between the Ravens, despite their awful performance in the AFC Championship, and the Orioles being a top team in baseball, ending their postseason drought last year, this is an exciting time, and they're capitalizing on it. And now you sell the team, and a few days later, you make a huge move. It's not the biggest move, obviously. We know, Shohei Ohtani. But one of the biggest moves this offseason.
Definitely.
And it really had me like, that could have been us. Like, I felt like, and I know everybody has different opinions on whether or not the Phillies should have gone after Corbin Burnes, but seeing what was included in this deal makes me feel like that could have been us. So my initial thought was like, wait, what? Like, they're close to finalizing a deal, and then minutes later, the deal has happened. And then my next thought was, could the Phillies have? Should the Phillies have? Would the Phillies have made this deal happen? But it makes sense for actually both parties as I read more and more of what was said coming out of the news.
Yeah, so the full trade happened where the Orioles receive Corbin Burnes. Milwaukee gets back infielder Joey Ortiz, who, if you put it in terms of, the Phillies don't really have this player with the major league experience and minor league options left. They don't really have that caliber player to compare it to. But if Joey Ortiz was in the Phillies farm system, he would probably be a top 3 or 4 prospect.
Yeah.
He's their 6th prospect. So the Orioles do protect their top 5 prospects. He's their 6th, equivalent to our probably like 2nd or 3rd, because the Orioles have the number 1 farm system in baseball. They also send left-handed pitcher DL Hall, who was used in a bullpen role with Baltimore last year, but Milwaukee views him as a starting pitcher, so they're likely going to give him the opportunity to start. And then, of course, the 34th pick overall in the 2024 draft. Now, you cannot trade draft picks in Major League Baseball unless it is a competitive, balanced draft pick. So that actually is a fairly valuable piece, the 34th. Rare that, I think it's relatively rare, Tyler, correct me if I'm wrong, that it's that high of a pick for a competitive balance.
I mean, generally speaking, you don't see a lot of comp balance picks getting moved regardless, just because for a lot of these teams that have the competitive balance picks, they are the small market teams. And these are selections that they oftentimes try to use to select guys that are, first round adjacent type players, where you get them at a cheaper rate because they're not, it is the first round, but it's not first round, quote unquote. So you get them at a little bit of a cheaper rate, but like teams like the Orioles, the Rays, the A's, the Reds, the Pirates, like
they count on these.
They count on these picks. That's a significant pick.
Yeah, so that was kind of the icing on the cake for the deal. I see a couple people in the chat saying Hall has had a hard time staying healthy. Hall, in terms of the Phillies farm system, would probably fall in like that 5 to 9 range, somewhere in there. But for the Orioles, I think he was 9th for them. So they essentially give up their 6th and 9th prospects, plus the 34th pick in the draft. Now, Corbin Burnes has 1 year remaining, and he is represented by the big bad wolf, Scott Boras. So an extension is unlikely now because, even talking with Zach Berman from the Eagles show today, I didn't understand the scope of Zach Berman's prospect love. But Zach made the good point, like, usually the Brewers are pretty well-run organization when it comes to prospects. So maybe they see something in these two that maybe others don't. But I think the general consensus online, Renee, is that the Orioles kind of fleeced them a little bit.
Yeah, so for Baltimore specifically, this is an opportunity for them to bring in a pitcher that can do something many haven't. Corbin Burnes, someone who's thrown over 200 strikeouts, and the numbers he's put up, he automatically bumps to the top of their rotation. So for them, it makes complete sense, even with the 1 year left. I know Barbara was mentioning that it's like a rental. It's a 1 year, then you go from there, and they still, as you talked about, have 5 top 100 prospects. Now, on the other side, for the Brewers, it may look like Baltimore clearly won this, but the Brewers, actually, both teams have openly said they were looking to make a deal, but they wanted to find the right fit. Neither team was desperate in that sense. We, of course, heard Corbin Burnes was being shopped way back in 2023, last year, at the end of the year, in the start of the offseason. So both teams were looking for that right fit, and the Brewers felt like they had it because they're saying, this is not a rebuild for us. This is us bringing in guys that can help us now and help us in the future. And they feel as though with bringing in both of these pieces, as well as that 34th pick, it allows them to have opportunities to bring in players that are major league ready. They didn't want prospects that still needed more time and that were on the cusp. They wanted guys that have already had a chance to play a good amount of major innings. And they thought that with those two, it's exactly that. So for Ortiz and Hall, they were talking about, and I know I've read different quotes from their front office about how they feel like they have bright futures. They are much like the Orioles. The Orioles are in a win now mode. The Brewers are also we want to compete now. This is not about a full overhaul.
I don't believe them.
I know, but actually, I'm like, okay, you're saying all the right things. We'll actually see what happens when you start playing games. But
I mean, they were going to lose them at the year's end. They're not going to spend the
and that's
open
exactly
market
what they
value,
were saying.
so.
They wanted to get something, knowing that Corbin Burnes had already made it known he did not want to go back to Milwaukee. So you're going to have him here for another year, knowing he wants to walk at the end of this season.
Yeah.
Versus being able to utilize him and get something in return. So I think for Milwaukee, it's a smart move. I still,
I would have guessed they could have gotten more.
I would have expected more. Exactly.
Yeah, I would have guessed they could have gotten more.
I think those 3 pieces are a good move, but I was expecting maybe 1 or 2 others pieces involved in that deal for Corbin Burnes.
So, Baltimore must feel okay with new ownership coming in, that they're going to be able to, you don't want to give all that for a 1-year rental, ideally. So it's Scott Boras. He's probably going to want Burnes to hit the market so that they can boost that number up. But I would imagine Baltimore's already got it in their mind where they're going to say, all right, here's $35 to $40 million a year for Corbin Burnes.
Yeah.
We'll extend him.